get through this level and nobody knows you're there. And that made me fall in love with stealth just from that game, where a whole bunch of other people would have just blasted their way through that game. And I've done that because I went back to it with the original graphics and everything, and I found the aiming thing too cumbersome, and I tried to stealth it and nothing worked. So I just had to blast my way through the game, and suddenly all of my memories and nostalgia left. All of my enjoyment was gone because the gameplay didn't work anymore. So it's a proper balance of all of these aspects.
Right. So
because the game is experiential.
Right. I think that's probably, I mean, they're all important. I think the one I notice most is gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's definitely the one, the first person that, like, the experience, the first person, like, what am I going through, I guess, is the one that sticks out to me the most.
Let me give you an inverse example of something that completely flips this on its head and does a terrible job. And because it's Hideo Kojima, everybody praises it, but Death Stranding.
Okay.
It is a walking simulator.
Have not
where
played
you
it.
deliver packages and do very little else. And if you're ever in danger, you're probably just going to die. It's just like, and when you get forward in the story, none of it makes any sense. And so you don't care about the story because it's just frustrating. And so you don't want to remember the story. And then the rest of the gameplay is you're playing through this all this stuff, and then it's got this sweeping music in the background. It's just like, you just made the perfect forgettable game.
Besides, I mean, sometimes games do that, and it's humorous almost. Like, the story's so weird, just like flips you in places that you did not expect. Like when Metal Gear Solid, I think it was the fourth one, where you went into the game simulator all of a sudden. Or but a game that would
breaking
do that,
the fourth wall.
Yeah, a game that does that like every 10 minutes, like that's its own thing, or memorable in its, like, a game that just continues to do that. So I don't know if Death Stranding was something like that.
Death Stranding, there was, okay, so here's what people will remember Death Stranding for. Ridiculous names. The names were just stupid. Death Stranding by itself is a stupid name. You can't tell me otherwise. It's just like, it doesn't make any sense. Even in context of the story, it makes less sense because the aspect of this weird alien kind of soul snatching thing doesn't make sense by itself.
Yeah.
So the names put in there is like dark. It's like dark, wet. I can't even remember the names. They're that dumb. Like hot wet man. It's like, that's a name? You named a character this.
Why'd you do? Yeah.
I gotta look it up. Death Stranding.
Because Death Stranding, like, I heard that game came out. Is that the one with oh gosh, the guy from The Walking Dead, the one that I thought got canceled? Oh, that was Silent. Was that Silent?
No, that was PT.
Okay.
PT got canceled. It was the horror game that he was going to do. That probably would have made more sense because it's a horror game. Those are supposed to be weird and scary. But yeah, so Polygon actually did a whole list of A to Z of Death Stranding weirdness. And it's just weird all the way. And do you know why? It's because of exactly what Andrea was saying about what happened with episode 1, 2, and 3 of Star Wars.
Oh,
Nobody would say
divorced?
no. Nobody would say no to George Lucas.
Right.
And so no one would say no to
Right.
Hideo Kojima. So he
Right.
just did everything he wanted to. And it's like, oh yeah, I made my perfect game. They're like, oh, okay, now I understand why. Because it's everything you wanted and nothing anybody else wanted.
Didn't have the constraints. Right. Right.
And so there's something to be said. There's something to be said for vision,
Mm-hmm.
for an artistic vision, but you also have to have a balance of, okay, but does anyone actually need this story? Is
Right.
it teaching anybody anything?
Right.
So it when I'm writing a book right now,
Mm-hmm.
and I told myself, I want to write the book that I want to read. Okay, well then I had somebody else read that,
Right.
somebody who I allowed to be completely critical, and he loved it, and I was shocked. I was like expecting a lot more criticism because he's very open, and I was like, okay, so that means that I've done my job and that there's an audience for this. I don't know if he did that for this. For Death Stranding, it's like, I'm sorry, if you had
Right.
asked somebody if having a ghost sensing baby strapped to your chest is a good idea, I think a lot of people would say no.
Yeah, yeah. I'm just imagining like like one of these like Hideo Kojima or one of these like artistic guys just like frolicking through the office, like shooting ideas out to everyone
And
and
everyone's
having
saying yes, that's a great idea, because they don't want to they don't want to upset him or make him leave or whatever.
right.
It's
And
just
I
like,
mean there is like I don't know how much like there definitely is something to be said for vision or like that childlike like let's go there like
good imagination.
right.
Yeah, but it's the same thing that I've been saying for stuff like story interpretation. Put it in context. If none of it makes any sense, and nothing is learned, it's pointless. And so if it's the shotgunning of that postmodernism does, where you bring out an idea and everybody claws away at that idea until it's dead. Or or we can bring out an idea and attach it to its history and give it context and say, okay, here's the idea in full context. And people go, oh, now I don't hate it as much. um, for example, it's like I keep bringing this up, but I bring it up because it matters to me. It's like the idea of the curtains are blue. I bring it up all the time
Mm-hmm.
because there is a level at which things shouldn't be analyzed because it doesn't go anywhere. You're just wasting your time analyzing a pair of blue curtains that somebody just mentioned to describe the room. That's it. I just want to tell you what the room looks like. There's nothing deep and profound about this. The curtains are blue. That's it.
Okay, so one thing I actually, when we had finished our talk, something was eating at me,
Yeah.
like, and because the only thing I would say is if I like, and something like I guess I've learned is just knowing that there's the like story, but being able to tell people like, I guess my proclivity would be to tell people, ah, like wanting them to know, but also being like, good for you if it was good for them, like their interpretation basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I went into this when it came up in the other talk, because
Hmm.
it was how do you react to somebody approaching you and
Right,
saying, this really made an effect on me and it was not something that you intended at all.
right. Yes.
Now, there's a difference between not intending it at all and disagreeing with it completely.
Right, right. Yes, yeah. And I think once you say like like you gauge from the situation. I mean, as part of it, but yeah, there's definitely a difference between uh, somebody's idea is something and like whether it's completely wrong, like you disagree with it completely, or
Yeah.
whether
And,
it's yeah.
and the other side of the curtains are blue is how is a raven like a writing desk? The it it describes something that is supposed to be overanalyzed because it's completely absurd.
Right.
And it causes, instead of stopping the feedback loop of, well, it could be this or it could be this or it could be this, that their curtains of blue stops a feedback loop. But how is a raven like a writing desk starts a feedback loop? And um, suddenly it's like, I can't stop bringing him up. He was so awesome. So Voth gave an example one time of brown. Okay,
Give me
crap is
1
brown.
second.
Yeah.
Okay.
So crap is brown, and a chair is brown,
Mhm.
and beef is brown. Okay? You only want to eat one of those.
Yes.
You do not want to eat a chair.
Yes.
And so brown, in context, is edible, but only in one context of those. And so that's why I said you have to bring in context for everything. Outside of context, things don't actually exist because they become pointless because there's no relating.
Right.
And so it brings in the circular arguments of what does this dragon mean? And it's like, no, that there's no meaning to this dragon. It's there to fight him. That's it.
It's used.
There's no big existential meaning to that.
Right. Okay. So what I thought of when you said things have to be in their context to make sense, like I thought of
Mm,
like a shoe or
yeah.
a shoelace. Like that's for stringing in your shoe and tying it. Like
Yeah. So it doesn't fall off your foot.
right, right, right. And yeah, that helps it make sense. No, I definitely get that.
Mm-hmm. Whereas you do something like postmodernism, and it's just like this shoelace was made by an oppressive company, so I don't want to contribute to them. So I'm going to take the shoelace out, and so suddenly your shoe is falling off every other step, and it's just like, okay, but is in context of you already having the shoelace, are you contributing? No. So it's just use the shoe. And the next time you buy shoes, you can think about that stuff. But you already have the shoe. Use the shoe you have. And so it keeps people from digging into unhelpful or self-harming arguments to where they stop using like electricity or something like that. It's just like, listen, you can work through things and disagree. It's like it doesn't have to be pure disagreement and all that stuff. Anyway, I feel like this is getting off into other tangents. How about Elder Scrolls? Uh-oh, I lost your audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think talking about the postmodern issues, that's definitely interesting, and we can like get back to that like later
Yeah.
if you want. But okay, so yeah, as far as I was thinking Elder Scrolls, and then I was so just like single players, I guess the difference between in the depth of experience between um a multiplayer game and a single player game like the Elder Scrolls, like they both can be really good experiences. I feel like definitely like Elder Scrolls, that is a much deeper experience than say like Call of Duty, even though Call of Duty like has its good points, and you can like have that feeling of victory,
Yeah,
but
and
but
you can do questions about war, but it doesn't really go outside of war.
hmm hmm
Yeah, whereas something like an adventure game or an RPG, I can ask any question it wants.
hmm
Yeah. So,
yeah.
what's your experience with the Elder Scrolls?
So I played it a lot when I was younger,
Hmm.
um, and I played through four is the one I played mostly when I was a kid, um, and I played that one like crazy. Like got my house all decked out with everything, and like pressed the joystick down so I could pick things up and put them like in certain spots in the house, and like had my thing like got up to like some crazy level, and then would just like hang around my house in a robe. And so I yeah it was good time being great time to be freaking
I don't usually reference them as the numbers. Which one is that?
four Oblivion.
Oblivion. Oh, okay, okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm
Yes.
sorry. I had this hole in my memory because I've played Morrowind and I played Skyrim, and I only
Mhm.
played a little bit of Oblivion. So I was just like,
Mm,
wait, which one?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It was definitely it was a super fun game. Like it had the like getting the side quests were almost like more fun, but that goes with every Elder Scrolls. Like there's there's a bunch of fun to be had in the side quests, and a bunch of fun to be had in like the story,
yeah,
um, like the bigger story. But yeah, so my experience has been great, good overall. Yeah.
yeah. Uh, the majority of mine opened up when I got introduced to Skyrim, um, because uh, I had, I think it was I think it was like the first single player game that I got. No, it was
So did you play Morrowind also?
I've only played Morrowind recently. I've been playing it with
Okay.
my brother. That's also on the channel.
Okay.
But I haven't played recently because
Cool.
he's been busy and
Cool.
anyway, but um the the experience that I had came from Fallout 3 because I knew that was a Bethesda game. I was like, okay, well, I'll try out other Bethesda games, and then my best friend started playing Skyrim, so I'm like, okay, I'll try it out. Um, and I liked how accessible it was because when trying to do other RPGs, there's so like I understand a lot of the folks that get into other RPGs and love how they can make their own character and get really deep into it and make a backstory and do all of this stuff. It's like I understand that. It's fully customizable. But I think where Skyrim got it right was that they made it fully accessible.
Hmm.
And the same thing with Oblivion. I think
Yeah.
that started with Oblivion is
Yeah.
that they made it fully accessible to anyone playing.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can really get into this without needing to know anything about the world, and you can learn organically.
Yeah.
Um, Whereas something like Morrowind, there's no voice acting, so it's kind of harder to understand what's happening because you got to read through each line of text and remember which book something is in
It's
and
interesting. Yeah.
write down what mission you're in or whatever, or go back in your journal that automatically updates or whatever. and, and so it becomes a lot more of a chore to
Yeah.
try to figure out when you save, leave, and come back, what was I doing?
It was yeah, it was much bigger in that respect. Like there was a lot of um like the whole like I remembered like there being letters that you would have to look back to. Like it was much bigger in that respect.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah.
So I'm basically having to do like this pseudo DM of Morrowind because I got a multiplayer mod and my brother and I are playing through Morrowind together, and it's very difficult because as a single player game it makes sense. As a multiplayer game, you're okay, you have to coordinate like where do we go, and the game treats you as one person kind of. um, but if the person who interacted with the quest leaves and is no longer available, like I don't know, it's really weird. And so you have to judge for yourself where you want to go and what story you want to tell and what missions you want to play.
So do you have to like agree on like if you start a mission, you have to agree on which missions you're gonna do?
Yeah, anyone can go to wherever you want
Right.
and start a mission, but as far as playing together, you have to agree where you're going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So if let's say he starts a mission in the main quest, like can you go forward in the main quest without
Yeah,
him?
I can go, yeah, I can achieve the goal without him being there. So here's an example. We did a small fighters guild thing, and they wanted us to clear out rats. You know, the classic RPG trope of clearing out rats from the attic or the basement or something. You know, it always happens.
Lovely. Lovely.
Um but they so I went into the place and I found the proper place and I started killing off all the rats, and he went back to the person who gave us the quest. And as soon as I was done killing the rats, he told them we killed the rats and we got the money.
Efficiency.
It's, yeah, yeah. So it's just like, okay, that kind of works, I guess. But um, it it causes a lot of mental
Yeah.
dissociation of
Cognitive.
like, wait a
Yeah.
second, I'm supposed to do that because this is like a single player
Tell him.
game. But
Yes.
it and so it it confuses you viscerally.
Right. Right.
um Whereas in something like, um I don't know, like an MMORPG, it's like it's really obvious that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
You're supposed to help each other out and go complete this quest because you're all in
That's
this
hilarious.
in a party together or whatever.
Hmm.
and and there's not really a party going on here. It's two guys that found each other on the map.
That's hilarious. That's hilarious. Okay, so I wanted to ask you what like just about the gods in the Elder Scroll. If you don't want to go there right now,
No, I
like
do. Yeah, yeah,
okay.
that's great. Yeah. So the gods in the Elder Scrolls games are based off of the developers and their friends.
Hmm.
And so the people who were involved each kind of contributed a personality trait, and that became its own pantheon god.
Mm.
Um, and so you've got the nine divines, or eight, depending on who you ask, and uh, the Daedra, which are
Hmm.
kind of like demons.
Hmm.
Um, Even like some people would literally call them demons, and they were originally called demons, but then they were just referred to as Daedra from then on because they kind of simplified the lore. Um, and so, the way that the origin story works is that one of the gods said, "Hey, um, I figured out how to make people
Mm.
and worlds and creation." And the other ones say, "Oh, that's interesting." And he said, "Would you like to help me?" And they said, "Okay. Well, what would it take?" It's like, "All of your power." And they
So this is
thought
one god.
one of them said that, and so he uh so the rest of them thought about it and said, okay, we'll do that, and they'll thank us for it. And so that's what happened. But this is a uh, universe of belief. So there's another version of this story in which that same God that helped create everything and that got it all kicking tricked the other ones into doing all this and didn't tell them it would take all of their power. So you've got two storylines going. Now, humans tell the version where it was benevolent. Elves tell the version where it was a trick.
Hmm.
And so you've got this odd dichotomy going on here where two things are technically true, and then you've got the different types of the religion where the humans are technically like a kind of a Catholic. They kind of live it out in cathedrals and all of this stuff, where elves are very Gnostic and they want to get back to the spiritual aspect. They want to they want to eliminate existence and be entirely above existence. That's it. Period.
So is
And
that just so I know, is that just the high elves?
yeah, the high elves focus on that. Like
Mhm.
that's the, what are they called? The Aldemari Dominion that you run into in Skyrim.
Mhm.
And they're the ones that are trying to stop people from worshiping Talos,
Yeah.
who is a man. Okay, so this is really tricky.
Yes.
So
Talos. Okay.
so a lot of the mortals of this plane have ascended. And so you'll hear of stories of Khajiit that have ascended and they've become like their local god or whatever. And you'll hear of that happening with some wood elves and a lot with the Altimer and the Dwemer, and or not the Dwemer. The Dwemer were entirely atheistic. The uh, what are the Dark Elves called? Um, anyway, it doesn't matter. They each have these people who ascended, and so that was like okay because they wanted to ascend. That was their entire point. These and each of these races had something to do with elves. There's a difference, is that um, men are a different creation entirely, whereas elves and all of the other races that are like elves were all created from elves.
So did
And
the elves come after the humans?
no, the elves came before,
Okay.
and the
Okay.
humans are are a different creation. Um, so and like even the I think there's like a relation the um, between the Khajiit and the Wood Elves or something like that. But like they're Khajiit are a descendant of elves too.
Okay.
So
Can you tell me if my
there's
intuition's right here?
okay,
So like you have the high elves who are very concerned with
spiritualism.
spiritualism, and then would the wood elves be closer to the humans? Like would they be kinder to a human if they met one?
No, they're more naturalist.
Mm.
So
So they just
their focus on nature to the degree at which they don't waste anything, even bodies. Like they were cannibalistic for quite a while. Like waste nothing. That kind of like pure naturalism.
damn, you know your
Um,
lore, dude.
well, I know it by fire hose. Like I just got right deep into it and then just blasted myself with all of this information. And um, so the anyway, so the ideas behind a lot of these is that these elven, even the orcs were a kind of elf, um, and these have people that have ascended up. Well, the difference was Talos was a human being who ascended. That's not allowed. That can't happen. As far as the high elves are concerned, that is an abomination. That shouldn't exist. It doesn't make sense to them.
That someone mortal ascended.
No, that a mortal human
Mm.
ascended. Because a
Okay.
human is a different creature entirely. Um, that's like some people debate whether or not animals have souls or whatever, but I'll just use this analogy. It's that's like going to heaven and seeing all humans and then suddenly seeing a horse. It doesn't make sense. So that the that idea that is how it's repulsive. Or no, I'll use this. I'll use a different analogy. Suddenly seeing a pig, like because of how unclean they are culturally,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
and so that is how repulsive it is to them. Is that how the heck did a human ascend? That's not allowed. That doesn't happen. And so, but not only did he ascend, he's not a minor god. He's with the nine divines. That's like blasphemy atop blasphemy. And so
That's good.
when the elves, when the Aldemiri Dominion took over, they started just hammering down on people that worshipped Talos, because they know how this plane of existence works in the Elder Scrolls. This entire plane of existence is on belief. If you get people to stop admiring Talos or talking about Talos or worshiping him, he will cease to exist. And so he won't be this stain on their image of the divine. And so
Mm.
when they ascend, they won't have to deal with him.
So are they trying to not believe in Talos?
Yes,
Or they just deny him? Or they just
they
right,
they denied that he existed.
right, right.
But whether he existed or not is not the point. It's that if they remove his knowledge of him or worship of him, he will lose relevancy in history itself and cease to exist, literally.
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 Okay.
And so that's because
Just
it's a realm of belief.
mm,
And the more something is believed in, the more it exists. And so, like, the nine divines are extremely believed in, even though they gave all of their power, or all of their major divine creation power in creation itself. Even
okay.
though they gave all that away, they can still bless people because they're, you know, otherworldly beings. But outside of that, they don't really interact with the world. That's why the Daedra are the ones that didn't participate, and so they still have all their power. That's why you see them all around the world interacting with people and messing with folks, and they just don't care.
Huh.
They're
Huh. That's
they're
interesting.
nihilistic gods.
Okay. Okay. So do you want to maybe fit like the gods into, so where do they fit in? Are they a big part of Morrowind?
Morrowind is a different beast entirely.
Mm.
So Morrowind is a kind of a go-between where you've got three. It's kind of a weird, freaky play on the not trilogy, the Trinity, um, where you have one guy. One guy is like an embodiment of spirit, I guess. And another one is an embodiment of the carnal, which is the woman, I think. And the other one is the embodiment of knowledge. And so this guy, he runs an entire a place called the Clockwork City, and every time he leaves, it stops running. And so it's like if you lived there, it would be like living in paradise because everything works and everything's automated and it all just works. But every time he leaves, suddenly you're in complete squalor
Mm.
because everything it's kind of like an analogy for us, like when our power turns off and if your water stopped working, like what do you do?
Yeah, a little bit of a what I thought of. Do you know? Wait. Who is John Galt? Does that ring a bell to you?
No.
Okay, so Ayn Rand's book, The Atlas Shrugged,
Hmm.
is basically about what would happen if, and people, I mean, what would happen if people are thinking about this book today, I think. What if the people who were, ran companies just decided to leave and go on strike? It's basically, she's
If
very,
CEOs went on strike?
yes, yes.
Wow.
And
Okay.
so in her tale, they all leave and everything falls apart because uh, the productive people decide that they're done, um, like carrying everyone.
Oh,
So
if
it's
all the productive people that actually got things done went on strike,
right,
the 20%.
right, yes, and
That
so
okay.
yeah, yeah, basically,
Yeah, because it's
So
the 80-20 rule. If
yes,
the 20% of productive people went on strike, everything would fall apart. Yeah,
yeah. So
that
so
makes
that
sense.
reminded me of the Clockwork City.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Whereas the other two, I don't know. I don't know the story that well because I haven't really gotten to that point in the story. But I think the the woman was married to the guy who ran the Clockwork City, and um, so you're interacting with these folks, and so the story that I've heard is told after Morrowind. So you're hearing about what happens with the main character. It's called the Nerevarine, um, who who basically makes all of this stop. And so you kill this great evil that has shown up that is trying to use this. It's called a brass tower, I think. But the brass, which is an idea. A brass tower is an idea that you create that is supposed to fix all of your problems and simultaneously become a god. And it's terrifying and destructive and a really bad idea. You never want to build a brass tower.
In the
But
game or in life?
ever, anything, ever. This is like,
Okay.
yeah, brass towers are a bad idea, period. uh, Thematically or in real life. So, but it's called the Brass Tower, but it's a robot. It's this giant steam powered robot that is basically used as this giant battering ram that takes over countries. Um, and this dark entity is trying to use that to take over Morrowind, from what I understand. Um, and so you kind of stop that from happening, and the the lady of that trinity kind of loses her mind and kills the clockwork guy, and then she gets killed herself. And the guy who is that kind of embodiment of the spiritual, he's like a living yin yang. Everything about him is balanced. Even like thematically, they even say his gender is balanced, and it's like everything about him is in perfect unity, and even his lies are true. Like he's such an enigma.
Mm.
None of him makes sense. um the and like, to the degree where you can actually look at him, and half of him is blue and the other half is gold, and that's not paint, that's him. It's his real skin. And uh he's got books written that are all of these sermons that he's done, and it just goes on and on. The lore on him by himself is vast and ridiculous because he's a ridiculous character in how hard he is to pin down. Um, but in a way, that's where there were kind of spiritual aspects go. Is it's like he's like the culmination of everything that when people try to ask questions like in psychology or like um in talking about like the mystical or whatever, you start asking questions. It's like logic doesn't work here. It's like even in psychology, a lot of logic doesn't actually pan out because there's so much illogical about us that it's hard to apply logic to us.
Good. Yeah.
Um, So in Morrowind, what you're dealing with in that particular game is not so much the nine divines or the Daedra, even though the Daedra are involved, and the major Daedra that's involved is um, kind of like the patron Daedra of the Dark Elves, and she's one of the only Daedra on their entire pantheon that is actually a good person, which is like because the idea behind good Daedra is a big question mark. So good Daedra would always have a question mark next to it. That concept, because they're very they a lot of them don't care, and a lot of them are very ambivalent and will not so much let bad things happen, but make bad things happen.
Okay, so I'm remembering the girl. I think she was a Daedra, like one of the shrines you went to,
Yeah,
where you were doing a quest to get a weapon or something. Uh, I'm not sure if she was a Daedra.
if you're getting a weapon and it's the one in a cloak with angel wings,
Okay.
that's that's one of the kind of ambivalent ones, and her entire idea is she hates the undead because it's not a form of living that should exist, and so she gives you like Lightbringer or something, and so
Mm.
thematically you would look at her and say, oh, this is a good Daedra, but if you look at her history and what she has done, and uh, and how ambivalent she is with certain things, it's just kind of like there's this subtle sliminess to her, even though she does a lot of good things. There's something off. Um, but whereas the shoot, I can't remember her name. Um, kind of
Um,
the patron Daedra of the Dark Elves is there's technically three, but the like one of them is the major one. She's the one that actually gave them the dark skin because it was like a curse after something. Um,
okay. Um, I'm looking. So there's the Daedric princes,
yeah,
and are those the ones that you get the weapons from,
yeah, yeah. The Daedric princes
or the
are the
items?
Daedra, but princes is kind of like the biblical term where it's just like people in authority. So like their gender isn't really brought into question.
Mm.
Um, and so a lot of them are seen as female. Uh, shoot, where is it?
Namira?
Um,
You want me to just rattle them off?
no, I've got them.
Okay.
Yeah. It's Azura.
Azura.
Yeah,
Yes, Azura.
Az- Azura. She's the one that maintains the balance between night and day. Um, she's the Daedric prince of Twilight, basically. And her realm is called Twilight, and it's so beautiful. Men go blind. it's 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 she is an interesting case study because she seems like the only one that is described as a good Daedra that actually tries to be good.
Mm.
Like
Okay.
not just being described that doing good things, like she actually tries to be good, and
Okay.
she tries to get other people to be good to each other.
Okay. Okay. Um, okay. So you
Big
have
thoughts.
so I asked about, um, one second, let me go back for a second. So
Mhm.
you have the gods. So the gods are different than the
Then the Daedra.
yes, the
Yeah.
Daedric princes.
Hmm.
And um okay. So when I remember going to the shrines, and I knew they were Daedric princes, but those are so. the shrines that have the big in Skyrim,
Hmm.
the shrines that you go to where it's the big statue of them.
Yeah, and you talk to them.
Right, right. So
Yeah,
those are the Daedric
those are the
princes.
Daedric princes.
Okay.
The When you go into a temple, you'll see small little icons where people would go pay their respects to the nine divines, and that's
Mhm.
where you would just get blessings. You don't interact with the divines.
Okay.
It's just it's not something commonly heard of, or if at all, because they gave so much of themselves in making creation.
Yeah, I remember they were definitely an outer thing. The only where I remember them being more in the story with in Elder Scrolls 4, there was the one where you became you had to like wear this you didn't have to wear it, but you got a like Holy Knights armor outfit,
Mhm.
and then you basically like walked did this like shrine pilgrimage thing. So I
Yeah.
remember them being, it felt like they were closer almost in that one, or they were more part of the story. It feels like, thinking about it, it definitely feels like they're part of the world.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
in
And
the,
that's I think that's thematically the point, because these are the ones that interact with the world but don't care about the world.
yeah.
But the ones that made the world care about the world.
Right.
Um,
Did you read the books they made on the
I did
Elders?
not read any of the books, no.
Okay. Okay.
Um, but the getting back to Azura, I kept going back to her because like the entire concept of a good Daedra, because like understanding this from a Christian perspective, that that's like saying a good demon. It doesn't make sense.
Right.
And but the Elder Scrolls is completely different, so I'm going to treat it different.
Right. Okay. So is
Where
it similar to the idea of a daemon? Like,
Yeah, but that's basically just saying angel,
right.
which is just a messenger or a go between. Um, and uh,
So the good
and
Daedra.
there were yeah, and it's basically a play on that, I guess. I would call that. And
Okay.
so the anyway, why Azura is so interesting is that
Yes.
she doesn't hoard all of the power to herself.
Mm,
Or all of the admiration to herself. She wants her followers to love her, but she also wants her followers to love each other, which is weird because that has nothing to do with what she is over. She has nothing to do with love. She's about balancing light and darkness. That's her realm. She's between night and day, and yet she's concerned about people. That set off alarm bells in my head, like, what's going on here? Why does she care? out of all of the Out of all of these ones that don't care at all, why does she care? And that so that's why she's so interesting to me.
yeah.
But on the other side of it is something that we haven't talked about at all, which is the Argonians,
Hmm.
and they have a completely different ball of wax.
Right.
It,
Right.
they don't have a god.
Right.
In a world full of gods, they don't have one, and they're not atheistic. They have
Mm,
the Hist tree,
mm.
and the Hist tree is um, I guess I would attribute it to Peter Jackson's Avatar,
Okay.
the Navi, where everything is kind of all in one place and all of the memories are shared. And um, when they die, they hope to go back to the Hist and all of
Okay.
this stuff, and it all reincorporates. And so it brings in a whole bunch of questions of what their afterlife will ultimately be like in some kind of ultimate destruction. It's like, if there are no more histories, are there any more Argonians, or is there kind of a spiritual thing after that? But you've seen Argonian ghosts,
Mm.
so there's obviously a spirit there. So there's something going on there. And and
So are they like naturalistic? They just like come from the earth?
yeah, but not as they're naturalistic, but um they're not like the wood elves. They're not as don't waste anything or anything like
Right.
that. It's um it's continue and survive, because you look at them and you see a people who put up with slavery. Like they there's not a lot of story. There are some stories, but there's not a lot of stories of Argonians um, revolting.
Mm.
But there are a few. But it seems to be it seems to be a culture of just getting by, of being grateful for what you have and moving on, and that kind of that kind of uh, is depicted by one particular character who is a marryable person, uh, who I did in Skyrim. Um, is it Shavi or something like that? Um,
She an innkeeper?
no, she
Okay.
works on the dock in like Winterhold.
Mm.
Um, uh,
I remember one, she was an innkeeper. That's the only one that's coming to.
I hmm, shoot, it's not letting me look it up. Hold on. Uh,
So you married this
yeah,
lizard.
and that means that I heard a lot of her quotes
Mm.
and the way that she interacts with the world, and um, interacting with a lot of the other people who you could do that with. I didn't get the same. I didn't get the same attitude, like positive attitude, out of them. It's like they were
Mm.
just kind of generally positive, where um, there was something different about her.
Mm.
She she had a life is hard, but I'm gonna choose to be happy
That's
thing
yeah.
going on, and that was extremely refreshing.
That's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and so shoot, what was her name? Shavi. Yeah,
Mm. Mm.
yeah. She's in yeah, Windhelm. Yeah. She used to be a thief, and my character was a thief. And so like the even the backgrounds kind of lined up, even though I was a Nord. And so it's just like I'm looking through all this stuff, and I'm just like, you know what? She seems really nice. Like
Shabby.
I want to keep her around. And so I would go home to what was it, like that that Dragonhold or whatever it is, or Breeze Home. I'd go to Breeze Home all the time, and I'd just be there, and she'd come by and say hello, and you know, it was just a positive atmosphere every time I'm coming home from an adventure. It's like I'm actually having a refreshing home life in a video game.
Oh,
It was weird,
yeah.
but that was that really helped me kind of understand when researching all of these things, the ways that the Argonians kind of go through it, because there's there's a general sense of long suffering, and I'm picking out these little things, you know, from Pentecostal upbringing, I look for these things in media because a lot of churches have gone towards this kind of entertainment thing. I'm like, okay, how do you entertain people uh, towards God? And but so I've looked at that even naively in video games and be like, there's some interesting stories going on in here. So you've got this entire culture of long suffering, who 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 want to be uh, who want to be content and thankful, and then you've got this weird, out of all of these pantheons and all of this stuff, and even the love goddess um, of Diabella is kind of weird in that it's like it almost gets pornographic, even though she's one of the nine divines. It's just like there's something wrong here. But then um, you go over to the Daedra, and they're all evil. But then you find this one good one that actually wants people to love each other. It's like, what's going on? What's happening?
That's
So
great. That's great. I love how they have different cultures. Like the different races have just they're different, and I like how like
yeah, there's a genuine diversity, and
even between like the human races,
mhm,
like the Nords and like the Bretons, which are two. Like the Bretons are more booky, and then the Imperials are more like uh,
they're they're well-rounded folk,
right.
and then you've got the Nords who are very hardy, um, and and the Red Guard, um, who are I think their thing was tradition or something.
Oh, well, and
I don't know too much about the Red Guard.
they were seafaring, weren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Um, and so they're travelers.
yeah,
They're yeah, and so the I think that kind of mixed like African and Middle Eastern culture around, and so it became like
yes,
a like they're nomadic, um, but
yes. It
they're
definitely had
nomadic,
a
but they
very
have a
Middle
land.
Eastern vibe.
Yeah,
So,
but and the orcs, like some of them entirely revere their uh, pantheon or whatever, and other ones just kind of ignore it entirely and live like an imperial citizen. And it's just like you just see an orc running a library in the Mages Guild. This is like, okay.
yes, that's great. That's my favorite. Those are like my favorite characters.
The ones that don't fit their mold at all.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I remember orcs being the mages, and it was like I liked them.
Yeah.
You're my
Where,
guy.
whereas prior to Skyrim, um, or orcs orcs were kind of harder to grasp, and like even in Oblivion there wasn't much going on. But if you go back all the way to Daggerfall, they were just an enemy. You couldn't be an orc.
Mm.
And um and that's also where they showed, in each game they show the huge differentiation you get in the Khajiit, where some are some are entirely cat and some are very human, and like where in Daggerfall it's just a human with a tail. And uh that's something that I was completely oblivious to, because in Skyrim they're just cat people.
hmm hmm
And
It's okay. So, wait, didn't the orcs have their own? They're just their own set of gods,
um
like separate from the nine.
no.
Okay.
So they I think they had a I don't I don't remember the story exactly. They had this really, they were elves, and they had this really revered god, but then it went they went kind of uh Greco-Roman with the storyline, and where one god eats the other, that kind of weird thing.
Mhm.
And so the one that had um the one that was like the god of trickery or whatever, the Daedra of trickery, and plots and scheming, uh ate ate the good one or whatever, and what came out was everything bad about the good one.
Mm.
and and so there was nothing good in him. It was like Malakath or something like that. And so it, and he thought, or at least his intention was, that okay, I've made nothing but I've made this one that you revere so much, nothing but evil. And they in spite toward him, they said, no, we're still gonna venerate him. And they covered themselves in whatever he was covered with, and
Mm.
that's why their skin turned green and whatever. And it's just like it. They got really gross with the story, but it made sense in context.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and but but they still have a kind of reverence towards um, towards certain gods in Daedra, where they're kind of a weird mix, because they've got folks that have ascended, and so they mostly focus on Malakath and those folks,
Mhm.
but they even venerate the one that actually did that to their god. It's so strange of why they do all that stuff,
So
because
did they? So they to venerate the they venerate the one who ate their god,
mhm,
but then to venerate their god, they somehow made themselves green, or they covered themselves.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
in
Okay.
in yeah in what he was covered with. And so the that was the idea behind why they became uh, uglier and turned green,
Mm.
is
Mm.
that they covered themselves in evil.
Okay. So it was like.
And so, but with the way that things are going, it seems almost like that's being kind of like it's being kind of extracted from them, because you go farther and farther into the future with with the orcs, and they're becoming more and more civilized, and
Right.
getting
Distant.
and
Right.
becoming better and better people,
Mm.
because if and so it's almost like it's culminating towards a rebirth or something of of orcs, which I don't think that the folks developing Elder Scrolls are looking that deep into it.
Right.
I think they're just trying to make orcs a playable character.
Hmm.
But the
And then,
that's the
well, I think they do play with the idea of like making some races more civilized, or some
mhm,
people in some characters more civilized, like for their race, like like
yeah,
mages who end up, or orcs who end up like mages. Like they play with that, and it makes sense that as history goes along, they're getting further from like the origins.
yeah.
Like they are
Mhm.
getting further. Um, and yeah, yeah.
But
No, it's interesting.
unfortunately, for like the future of these games, it's very up in the air, because on one hand, folks want to be able to play the entire continent. On the other hand, the experiment of Elder Scrolls Online is kind of waning.
Mm,
It's
mhm.
not really that good.
Okay.
Um, and
Would you
that
recommend it?
doesn't, huh?
Would you recommend it?
With friends,
For sure. For sure.
yeah. I wouldn't recommend it as a solo experience.
Right. Well, if
Because
you
it's
ever
kind
want to play, let me know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But my computer can't run it. I'm
Mm,
I'm 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 working off of what I know about it through observation
for
and
sure.
and YouTube videos,
Mm,
and and a lot of firsthand experience from other folks that understand the Elder Scrolls games. Um, but it calls into question where they're going to go forward with this stuff, because what's next in Elder Scrolls 6 has to be after Skyrim, and there's a
Right.
lot of unanswered questions with Skyrim. And
And it's a lot of map to try and
yeah, and
cover.
it's a lot of map to try to cover, because they want to be high resolution, but they also want a lot of maps. So it's just like, okay, well, do you store parts of the map online and then let it load or something? Or because each game is kind of focused around a section of the continent,
Right.
and that's why Skyrim is called Skyrim. It's in
Right.
Skyrim, but and why it's Morrowind. But you don't really spend a lot. There's only one game that's technically in Black Marsh, which is where the Argonians are coming from, and none of it has to do with anything with Black Marsh, because you're in a jail and you're just going around in this kind of silly mobile game just fighting orcs, and that's
Okay.
about it.
So that's
And
that's all you get.
yeah, and you don't see a single Argonian. So it's like there's so outside of Elder Scrolls Online, if you want to experience the places you've never been, that's a online will get you there. You can go to Black Marsh and experience Black Marsh for yourself and see all the different factions and understand what the culture is like on a surface level,
Mhm.
on not a surface level, on a personal level. But a lot of that, the problem with Elder Scrolls Online is that it's a prequel, so you're not actually experiencing it the way that it's supposed to be later. And it's
Mhm.
such a far-flung prequel that it's way before anything that we've played before. So we have no idea the context of anything that's going on, and it all just seems like this is stuff that that isn't really going to matter in Elder Scrolls 6, because it's
Mm.
so far away.
Mm.
So it's kind of it's kind of fruitless. But if you want to experience like the different kind of Khajiit, to you can go to elsewhere, and you can go to Black Marsh, and you can see the hist trees and all of their magnificence. Like, they're huge and really glowy. Um, and that's the only way that people have been able to really experience these places that nobody has seen before outside of the original games,
Mm.
outside of modding,
Mm.
which some folks have tried to do out of just the descriptions that you've got from books and other games, is trying to figure out what elsewhere looks like, and the
Right.
dunes and all of the stuff in the
I mean,
cities.
some people are good as long as they're doing their homework.
Yeah, and there's big projects that they're actually doing really well. Like, there's an expansion for Morrowind that folks are doing right now, that I've walked out into the plains of where they're going. And because the Morrowind game is on the island in Morrowind, whereas the rest of the territory of Morrowind is in the rest of Cyrodiil. And that crescent of land you can actually go to now for some of what people have done. And there's towns, and there's changes in the cities, and you can see influence from other cultures, and suddenly the big mushroom trees are turning into regular trees, and like you can see the difference in terrain and how things interact. And so it really feels like a real world at that point, because there's a
Mhm.
transition from climates.
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and that's just a mod, and these people have
Yeah.
spent like months and months on this
Yeah, I
stuff, so
know.
it's
As you were describing it, I was
fantastic.
remembering just like the towns in Skyrim and the towns, like the way the developers did it. Like even mods, like I really like if people do their homework and are like making it legit, they can make some really cool places.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it's a funny story from Skyrim. So when the expansion came out where you can make your own home came out,
Yes, yes.
uh
Hearthfire.
Hearthfire, that one, yeah, yeah. I bought the house that was the farthest south.
Hmm.
Um, out of because I was thinking like, okay, in the context of a game, I'm married to a reptile. She would want to be in a warmer climate. I'm just like, so I moved south into where it's like in the fall constantly. And
Very nice.
yeah,
Very
so
nice.
it next to that like that town that's like nothing but thieves or whatever, where the Thieves Guild is.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. I know this one where it's Riven Riften?
Riften, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, Riften.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the and so I just moved south and I was like, okay, yeah, we're set. But and then I got bogged down in the house building and it's just so tedious. I gave up.
It's very basic. I feel like they did a good job with Hearthfire. Like and maybe a little bit um like at first it was good, and then they did some other things that made it yeah, that was my experience. Was it was just good, it was like solid, and it was basically worth it for me.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but where um back to the kind of supernatural stuff. Um, the thing that I had been digging into is like, okay, what's up with all of the different uh afterlives?
And if you want to, yeah, if you want to somehow bring it to sorting myself out, like the I guess practical applications of video games, how it's practicable,
Oh
that
yeah,
that might
like
be
look
cool. But definitely the paranormal, that's good stuff as
yeah,
well.
there the one that bugged me the most was um the soul cairn, which is that's where all of the that's where the souls are kind of held um when they're used in a black soul gem. So
Mm,
if you use a black soul gem and use that on a human being, it will take them to the soul cairn until they're used.
mm.
It's just like that's a disturbing that's a disturbing prospect of an innocent person being annihilated entirely for power.
Right. And
And
then aren't they waiting there while you're they're waiting there until you use the soul gem.
yes, and then once that's used up, they're stuck there and they basically it's like a weird kind of soul decay. It it doesn't make sense to me, but like I understand the idea behind if you're using things as power, power has a decay to it. So um, so it as a kind of a materialistic way of dealing with souls, that makes sense. But it still bothers me viscerally because you can end up um, annihilating an innocent person, and that bothers me. So it's the but the idea behind the soul cairn itself is it's run by these like uh like these extremely powerful mages that did kind of the lich thing, but instead of putting their soul into another vessel and then just becoming this skeleton lord thing,
Mhm.
kind of like the dragon priests, um, they instead poured everything they could grasp into making their own plane of existence, which became the soul cairn, and and then feeding off of the souls trapped there
So
in perpetuity.
they basically did that to just keep themselves around.
They did that for eternal life, but
Right.
a completely artificial eternal life. And it works. It's technically forever, but at the same time, with all of these other options of afterlives, it seems like the dumbest one, because it's nothing but this bland,
Right.
freaky landscape in which you're just watching people wander around waiting to disappear. It's not a nice place. Like, the best place I can think of going to outside of like that mead hall or whatever that they do in Skyrim is is going to Azura's Plane of Twilight. It's just like, yeah, you might go blind, but it's beautiful and the whole place smells nice at least. It's just like there's so many better options than
Right.
being eternally powerful for no reason.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You could I mean, you could strive to ascend, or you could, yeah, no,
Yeah,
those all sound like great options. Better, better
way
than,
better options.
yeah, yeah.
And even some of the necromancer options seem like better options, because at least eventually you could decide to give up. It's
Right.
like it's stuck in the soul carrot. It's just like, yeah, I run this place. It's like you're running a dump.
Yeah. I'm disembodied and I do nothing.
Yeah, yeah. And they're basically just glowing orbs in the sky that tell you whether or not you can leave.
Mm. And so people, so when you have people use the soul gems to power their magic weapon.
Oh, that's another thing I was worried about, is like the whole prospect of soul gems, because you're trapping souls and using them.
Right.
The difference is that this is the stuff that is related to the black soul gems.
Mm.
Regular soul gems aren't like that. If you use a soul in a regular soul gem, that soul can move on.
Right.
It's like, okay, we use the power that we wanted to use for this specific magical purpose. You can go.
Right.
And that's it. It just passes on to
Right.
whatever afterlife it was going towards.
Donskis. Right.
But the soul cairn is evil. It's annihilation. That's why
Right.
people don't want to use black soul gems. It's a bad thing. It's cruel.
Man,
Um,
dude, I'm going to be morally against using black soul gems
I know,
next
yeah.
time I play. I'm going to be like avoiding them and thinking about how often I used them before, willy nilly. How
It's like,
many?
oh yeah, here's just this game mechanic. It's like, oh no, you're making a moral choice inside this game every time you
No,
use this.
dude. I totally make moral, like I make it a moral thing when I'm playing a game.
I know, I beat myself up over crap like that in
Dude,
video
I saw,
games.
yes, 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 absolutely. There
Hmm.
was a meme I saw,
Yeah.
and it was some like parent or like some person saying like, "Oh yeah, kids, video games make kids worse." And then it showed a picture of a guy, and he's like, "I felt bad for killing him," or like, "I drove like a guy like driving correctly in traffic in like Grand Theft Auto," or like
Yeah.
picking the nice dialogue choices. Like, yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Full paragon protagonist, all blue, no bad guy in this thing. Like, try never to do a dark side thing in a Star Wars game. It's just like, yeah, it's like, yeah, sure, it makes people evil. It's like, no, it gives people the opportunity, but it doesn't make people make these choices.
right.
It will reflect the reality that you want to project. And like and I don't like dishonesty. I don't even swear. And so when my character has swearing in the dialogue, I try to avoid that option. I was just like, I don't want to say that.
I can tell you're very immersed in games, or you're very like, you very much take it from like a first person like perspective.
Well, to tell you how immersed I was is, um did you ever play the Command and Conquer series stuff, like Red Alert or any
Uh,
of that?
I wanted to, but I didn't.
Okay.
Not
So
enough.
um I would kind of get into the role playing of being the commander. And so when the characters on the screen were addressing me like I'm talking to Kane or someone or uh or Stalin or some of the allied or Einstein uh uh in Red Alert 2, he will address the commander. I'll be like looking at him and nodding and agreeing with him and stuff like that. Um and then and like Yuri would come on from Yuri's Revenge and he'd be like taunting me. I'm like, uh-huh, yeah, sure. It's just like it's just going back and forth with these people that were just hammy actors doing a funny video game.
That's great.
But I mean, they had the greatest people on those games. They got Tim Curry. They got freaking Tim Curry for Red Alert 3. That's hilarious. But the the first person projections affect how you interact kind of interpersonally.
Right.
Um,
Right.
to give an example, I said a while back I said something a while back, and Voth had said something similar, where he said that he was working on a book, and the person he was writing was a terrible human being, and was extremely resentful. And then one day he snapped at his wife. Voth snapped at his wife, and then he stopped himself and he said, "Why did I do that? Like why was I angry at that moment?" And then he realized it was because he was in the midst of writing this character, and this character was in his head, and he was kind of living through this character's life at the same time he was writing it, and it was affecting him. And so he had to stop writing for a couple of months. And I said, yes, that is exactly what happens. I said in one of my posts on his memorial wall, I wish people had warned me about becoming a writer, because the worlds that writers create are real and they live in them.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that experience uh, where I was writing a death in one of my books, and I had to write the reactions of my characters, and I had to get up and talk to somebody afterwards because I felt terrible. Because not only did I have to live through the grief, I had to live through the fact that I was the one technically killing them.
Yeah, man.
It's just like, gee whiz, why is this so visceral? But it's true. Your imagination is a part of you.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you interact with these video games and you think about them, there is something real there. I'm not saying video games cause violence, but they can make you a little bit more aggressive.
So how'd you I'm just curious about the death in the book. Is that the book you're writing now?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And so was that so you had to make the scenario, and then like did he die in a bad way? Or how did
Yeah, yeah, he was slumped over sitting on a bunch of crumpled boxes like this, and his
man.
yeah, it was blood running down the shirt and everything. I had to describe it. I had to tell him what happened. Like, it was the guy that was standing that he was talking to had to realize it had happened, because it was one of those like silent kills kind of thing where it's like it happens and then someone notices, and it's just like, oh my gosh, and then everything kind of exploded from there.
Yeah.
And it's a huge scene, because it that's where it starts. That's not where it stops. That starts there and then gets more
Jeez.
visceral, and more things happen and more people die. It's like the Red Wedding. It just got terrifying internally that I had to write that. And so as soon as I was done, there was a fight at the end of that chapter. As soon as I was done with that, I just had to kind of take a breath and like, geez, because I lived through the fight. I lived through the gunshots in the hallway. I lived
Love
through
that.
the knives and all of that stuff. It like I have to describe this stuff. and it just seems like words on a page, and it's not.
Man, man.
Yeah. And so you can get into that in embodying someone in a video game where
Yeah.
it's just like, oh my gosh, I made this choice and that person died. I feel terrible. I need to reload. Like, and you don't even feel fully okay after reloading because it still kind of happened in your mind.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely have realized that you can tell some things about people's personality by watching them play games,
Hmm.
like or like how they relate to playing games. Like my brother, he'll play Grand Theft Auto and he'll just like willy-nilly, hilariously just run people like just destroy people, and it's funny when it's funny.
Yeah.
He's basically doing it to get a reaction from me or whoever's like watching,
Hmm.
um and then like me, I'll be like having a moral conundrum, or like, and then my dad, he's the one who like wants to learn everything before he moves on to like the next room,
Yeah. Hmm.
very much adventuring,
Yeah.
and so you have like these
That's
different gameplay
he's
styles.
got a Fallout mentality where you're checking every single drawer and you want
Yes.
to make sure that you don't leave any money behind or stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. I was a complete scavenger in Fallout. I had
Mhm.
everything. Like all of the money that I acquired was not from selling things. It was from looking through every single drawer.
Yeah, dude. I could spend a long time in one room,
Hmm.
like just looking at stuff and trying to find everything and seeing like, yeah, yeah.
A fun thing to do with a friend in something like a co-op game. Like I used to do this in and not Fallout in Halo. In Halo, there was a really great thing that you could do with a friend. Um, find a doldrum or clear out an area or something where you can just stand around and talk and look at the environment and then try to figure out what happened. It's just tell a story with
Mm,
what's going on in the environment, or you
mm.
can go to a multiplayer map and try to figure out what happened there before you showed up, and you'll see things like there's a pile of papers on the ground here. It's like, okay, so here there was a scuffle, or somebody had to run away in a hurry. There was something urgent going on here. The door is blasted open. Why? And then you start asking these questions and connecting these dots, and suddenly you're at the other end of the map, and you're like, so that's where he got out. And it's just like, who? It's like, we don't know. Like, or they died here and you can see like a body left there or something, and you can really carry through the storylines, which happened in uh Halo ODST. The entire thing was a what happened here.
Okay.
That game is you filling in the blanks of what's going on in the city while it's being occupied by the Covenant
Mm,
and trying not to get shot.
mm, mm.
Yeah.
Dude, that's cool.
Yeah, it was a fantastic game.
That's cool. That's cool. So you go to an environment and try it, like, can this, so I'm thinking like, okay, so I'm playing Call of Duty and just going into a map and like seeing, okay, so that truck, you can see the tracks from the truck
Hmm.
going here to where it's parked,
Yeah. The
and
door's open. Where's the
right,
driver? Where did he
right.
go? Yeah. Hmm.
That's hilarious.
You can do it from any map,
Mhm.
anywhere, anything. Unless it's just like a completely open field and you don't see any
Mhm.
debris or anything, you can usually figure something out
Mm,
um,
mm,
through just um, what was it? What was it called? Is it? I think it's abductive reasoning,
mhm.
where you're making educated guesses based off of your assumptions.
Right, right.
It's not deductive. It's abductive. That's what Sherlock Holmes does. Abductive reasoning. He makes extremely educated guesses, and he's
Right.
usually right.
Right.
That's why it's kind of insane, because it's not deductive, it's abductive, and he's usually right.
Right.
So it's like,